Hello. In today's tutorial, I want to be covering a topic that's super close to my heart, one of my favorite astrology topics, the 12th house. Now, whether you have anything in your 12th house or not, you will find this presentation helpful, as in one segment I covered the option of not having anything in your 12th house, but obviously this will be particularly relevant and useful to you. Sorry, my cough is relentless. Useful to you if you have planets in your 12th house. So the tutorial or the presentation is structured in sort of three kind of segments, if you like. In the first part, I'm going to be talking about the three key qualities that I feel are something when we're working with our 12th house or contemplating it, we need to keep front of mind. It's like do not forget these kind of things. Um, and and within that segment, I'll then give you some practical tips how to work with the 12th house, how to understand it, how to get a better feel for it. Uh, then I'm going to address something which for me it's been the biggest stumbling block in understanding my own 12th house is this kind of is this division, or at least I saw it as a division because I saw only one-sided text and articles, and I needed another piece to that 12th house so that I can relate to it better. So this is spirituality versus art. So is it spirituality or is it art is the question I pose, and I offer some of my thoughts and then some examples. And at the end, I'm gonna just like I do what I call the guided feel through. So I have a few slides of images that I feel particularly well evoke the vibration, the frequency of the 12th house, and I'm gonna probably speak through all of them, but you can mute me and you can or you can do both, listen to me first and then come back to it. And because 12th house is particularly conducive, the understanding of it for us to kind of grasp it when we is to evoke it, as opposed to use our logical mind to understand it, like I say. So that's at the end, a guided feel through. Okay, so I call this presentation the elusiveness of the 12th house because I feel this word elusiveness is really like the starting point. Really, it's like the starting point. You need to kind of be made peace with this before you enter it. And so the definition of elusiveness is the quality of being difficult to grasp or pin down. 12th house on Neptune or Pisces is a kind of I don't overlap exactly the houses and the signs and the planets, but they are of a similar vibration, so I will lump them here together. So when you enter the 12th house, sorry, so this sort of 12th house archetype is part of the grand mutable square where we have Mercury and Gemini, and then we have Mercury and Virgo, and then we have Jupiter. Why I'm bringing up particularly the Gemini Mercury is that in some ways this is almost like this is the ultimate shape-shifting house. So if Gemini is a shapeshifter, or Mercury is, and is elusive, or it's like a trickster, not elusive but trickster, and that is kind of the same thing. It's a trickster. So this 12th house is like trickster on steroids, but it's so in that sense is this elusiveness piece that it's so important. And as we enter it, we need to remember that whatever we are doing there, it's not going to be something that we can retain even when we come out of it to kind of tell about it in using Mercury language as we know it. And while we're in there, we must do away with this desire to grasp it, to pin it down, to define it, to get precise and specific about it. And as I was contemplating what's the best kind of image for this particular sort of word and quality of 12th house, I just remember this image. This is when I discovered them. This is MC Escher, Escher. Artist is a Pluto in Gemini generation, so he's like a late 19th, early 20th century. And so he's full of these sort of, you're probably familiar with this, it's made into popular culture. Like an optical illusion. And this, I love the fact that this is water, which is Neptune, which is 12th house. It's a water house. And when you look closely, or very quickly realize that you cannot almost, you cannot, what's the word? You cannot define it. You cannot explain it. That's it. You cannot give it a logical kind of mathematical definition. Well, maybe I'm actually out of my depth here. Maybe there is a way to do it. But every time I looked at it, I was trying to kind of explain what's going on to describe the illusion. I couldn't. The words failed me. I couldn't. So maybe it's just me. But as I'm trying to also kind of make sense of it, it keeps slipping. Yeah, I just keep slipping. I mean, it is a slippery sort of slope anyway, this, but it's not a slope, it's flat, and yet it's not flat. So it's, yeah, anyway, in my view, it just describes this elusiveness. You can't pin it down, I can't define it, I can't explain it, I don't know how to describe this picture to someone, basically, other than it's just the water that looks like going up and down, but it doesn't go up and down. And how does that help? How's that descriptive of this? I don't feel it captures anything about it. See what I mean? So it keeps eluding me. So that's that. The second important quality of 12th house to remember always is that it's our blind spot. So I picked this. It's what's the word? Poster for a theatre play, and I'm trying to see where it is. It's Adelphi Theatre. But it's the famous tale of the Emperor's New Clothes. And in essence, the tale, the Neptune, or rather the 12th house analogy there is that, in fact, all of it is kind of 12th house, is that he believes people and his advisors who are, I can't remember why, are they mocking him, or I can't remember why they set him up like this, but basically he thinks he's being dressed in these amazing clothes these tailors are doing for him, where really he's just being naked in his underpants, and he's walking through town, and like as if he's dressed in the most amazing clothes, where the whole world of the people, his people, yeah, are like either laughing or just shocked because they see that he's naked. My point here is that that's the 12th house piece, is that we don't see what others see in us, in whatever we have in our 12th house, our qualities, and not all of it. It's never, cut and dry, or certainly not when it comes to 12th house. So it's some of these energies are not familiar to us, or rather, not that they're not familiar, they're just, we're not aware of them. So we have to kind of put intention and really dedicate ourselves to spend some time in our 12th house to get a feel for those energies and to understand us. And even then, I would say I'm quite traveler through my 12th house, and again, traveler in what my 12th house is. It's not like anyone, it's not like everyone's house. We all have a different kind of in that sense. And I know, I keep, I still have times when I know that something has just leaked and someone has pointed it out to me, and I'm like, oh God, yeah, of course. Now I by now know all this. I just can't see it coming every time. And so someone who is not me will see it. So it is a blind spot, and it's kind of the source of frustration of 12th house, and why when I work with clients in a 12th house, placement, I mention sometimes a projection, because we think it's the people telling us we are wrong or we are bad or something, where really they're seeing something about ourselves that we don't. So I wouldn't be so quick if it's let's say, have Venus in 12th house, relationships will be painful, well, or could be painful, certainly have been in my case since I have the placement, but I'll eventually learn to take on board what's being said, even if it's painful, not necessarily enjoy the company and have the company, and I'll easily kind of do away with the company, but the message the others send to you about you, particularly the difficult ones to hear, are particularly useful because they're probably seeing something, and yet they're seeing it through their own eyes. So there's always that, and it's never clear cut, particularly 12th house. But don't be, consider what you have in your 12th house, and then when faced with those archetypes in others, don't be too quick to think it's them and I just have a problem with them and just ignore what they say. Because you don't like it. It's maybe because they're seeing something that you are missing, your blind spot they're seeing. So bear that in mind. And the third quality of 12th house is that partly why is this underlining allure, right? Is that how you pronounce it? this attraction that we have towards our 12th house placements, those archetypes are particularly alluring to us. But at the same time, is a scary place because it is about the ultimate. It's 12th house is at the end of the zodiac, so it's like it's all the signs when they come. You know, it's the sum of it's the sum of all parts, of all your parts, of all universal parts, universe parts, cosmos parts, history parts, future, past, tense, everything, anything. So it's a totality, and it's overwhelming for that reason. But that totality is one maybe sentence in a definition of the ultimate meaning, and yet again, definition as a term and as a category, as a quality, doesn't really live happily in the 12th house. So you're back to be square one kind of thing. But my point is, we know that once we get there, we'll know more than maybe we want to know, more than I was going to say maybe even are able to take on. But I do believe that, you know, if we are willing to go there, then we are able to take on whatever we see. So I believe that we are sort of faced with things that we can carry. I mean, it might crash us in the sense, but not kill us, you know. And yet you always hear warnings about the 12th house, that it's a dangerous place, and it can be dangerous if you use it as an escapism and to numb yourself out, and you're then, what it means, you're completely in the 12th house. So what I mean by that, and when you look at this screen with 4 tarot cards, so the Hermit is the Virgo piece. That's Virgo. Virgo is the Hermit card, and the other 3 are Pisces flavor cards. So you have to be grounded when you're in 12th house. And so whatever you're doing there, you have to have one foot in the 3D world. And when I say escapism and numbing out, that's when we go both feet in the 12th house. And that can be dangerous. I don't think it has to be at all. I think I've been there, 2 feet. And yeah, I mean, it was harder to get out. And it wasn't dangerous while I was there, but it was like not helpful to my life and my 3D life, if you like, my physical life. So it was harder to get out because you have no foot in the other world. There's nothing. How do you get out? Yeah, I don't know if this metaphor is great, and I don't know how to explain how hard it is to get out when you have 2 feet in there, but hopefully you get it. So you need the Virgo piece, or whatever its opposite, your 12th house. So that flavor, it will always be the 6th house, so you always have the Virgo flavor in it, which will ask for discernment, for a ritual practice, and ritual essentially is just grounding your spirituality. It's what do you choose to practice to kind of keep you safe in your 12th house. And the 12th house is the moon, moon being the sort of, in the darkness, and the 12th house is the darkness, but of all kinds, and the beautiful darkness as well, the not so beautiful. But the point of the darkness is that we don't see clearly, and we only have some sort of moon reflection to maybe show us the way, but essentially we're relying on our intuition, and the High Priestess is very much intuition. And then the Hangman is the sort of Neptune card. And that's the kind of, again, piece of the ultimate meaning, because it's a topsy-turvy perspective, like the upside down perspective. And it's almost like, in order to figure out the ultimate meaning of life and us on this planet and in this body, but also beyond, we do have to view it from a different perspective than in our bodies. We're too close to not just our bodies, but our life, 3D life, when we contemplate it from our 3D mind perspective and body perspective. So the 12th house, the sort of topsy-turviness of it is the lens through which we glance and glimpse. Brought it all together. Glamps. The ultimate meaning. But like I say, because it's it's just like what is there after reaching that point? Nothing really. Just who wants to come back? So that there's that danger that we also feel innately. So that's why we don't go there, because as much as we speak, we want to know the meaning and all that. I don't think we do, because it would kind of mean the death, but maybe not literal physical, but of the ego certainly, and ego in a healthy sense as well. Our sense of identity is like, this body, this persona. It's like, I have these desires, I have these wants, and I want to have these wants, and that's why we're on this planet, as in human body, to be human, with the ego as well as the rest. So that's my point. It's like, it's the ultimate meaning, and the attraction is there, but it's also, why we don't go there, maybe. Okay, and then, so let me give you some tips as to how to work with your planets there. So essentially, you want to start with understanding them in themselves. So if you have Sun there, to understand Sun in 12th house. But really, you want to understand Sun. So it doesn't even matter that it's in the 12th house. The fact that it's in the 12th house means you probably don't understand it. So you really want to start with understanding the Sun archetype, let's say, or any so. So you want to look at your returns. So Sun returns essentially your birthdays, so solar returns. So, and I have a tutorial on how to do solar returns. So you just, but essentially, it's not even that you're looking at the solar return chart. What you want to do is, from your birthday, you want to observe the first quarter square to your Sun, natal Sun, the opposition, and the last quarter square. So let's say, like me, you are a Taurus, 15 degrees. So after my birthday, I'm very much aware of when exactly it's gonna be, exactly the same spot as my birth spot of the Sun, and then I would choose that time to contemplate the Sun archetype. And I have books, I've shared it on many other platforms, as in videos. Ram Butler's The Archetypal Universe is a good one, or just read up everything about Sun, basically. And then contemplate, spend a couple of hours or a day if you can afford it, and just contemplate the archetype of Sun. Then bookmark in your diary or journal or whatever diary, when it gets into Leo. So this is the 15-degree Taurus. Because even from the moment it gets into Leo, you'll be in the, the first quarter square will be already intensifying, and it will be happening exactly on the 15th degree of Leo, which would be whenever, usually around the 8th of August. And then again, time to contemplate and see what's happening in your life regarding the Sun archetype. And then the next time you want to be, focusing on your Sun, on your Sun to understand it, but also focusing on the Sun transiting. You want the Scorpio season, because that's opposite of Taurus, so that would be the opposition time. And as soon as he enters Taurus, Scorpio, you want to be contemplating the Sun archetype again, and then you're journaling, presumably, and hopefully through all this I've just shared, and then you compare what you've been writing before. You reflect on that, and then see what's again happening in your life. And then you want to wait, particularly for the 15th degree of Scorpio, which happens, I think it's about, again, 8-9 November or something. And then Aquarius time. So as soon as the Sun enters Aquarius, you're contemplating last quarter square. And next week I'll have a video on how to plan with astrology. So if this is of interest, be sure to tune in and just watch, basically, as I'll kind of go into more detail about these points. I'm just talking about the squares and oppositions as to how to view them. And yeah, so do that with every planet. So I'll put here the dates. So Mercury goes around 88 days. I mean, this really doesn't mean anything. It doesn't necessarily, you don't need to know. You just need to watch when Mercury enters your natal placement, so in my case, Gemini. So as soon as Mercury enters Gemini, if I have Mercury in 12th house, I'll be thinking about my Mercury, and just Mercury, and see, and as he makes those 4 points, 4 turning points, I'll be considering it within that context, and you'll get a greater feel for the planet that otherwise you don't have the easiest access to. That's why I do this. Okay, and so this is the next step to deepen this knowledge. Now you're getting specific that it's actually in the 12th house, so which is Pisces and Neptune. But so I've given you some examples. So essentially, you want to be looking at transits to Neptune. And also you can actually look at transits. So if you have Mars in Taurus, you can pay attention to Mars in Pisces. So it will be doing a sextile to a natal Mars. So that's those kind of transits. I find they're not that noticeable. I don't even work with them in terms of transit sextiles. Those kind of personal planets. Saturn onwards, yes, I do, but anything below Saturn, I don't really do much. I mean, it depends, but you might not feel it as much, or it might not be nothing particularly monumental happening or big feels or whatever. But by all means, try. So, to understand your Mars in Taurus, pay attention to Mars in Pisces transits, but more importantly, far more potently, um, pay attention to, or rather, start observing Mars transiting your Neptune, and even more importantly, Neptune transiting your Mars. But also to understand Mars in Taurus, you want to be watching Venus aspecting your Mars, natal Mars. So, in a sense, after just observing and understanding and trying to get into the essence of your natal planet by observing the return and the 4 points that it makes in terms of aspects, the next step is actually to think of that. So Mars in Taurus, to understand Mars in Taurus, and then bring that to the 12th house maybe. So like I say, watch Venus transiting your Mars because Venus rules Taurus. Or you can watch no, that's actually, I think that's the best way to do it, and then move on to Neptune transits. And that can be either way, but it's always better that it's Neptune on your Mars. So Neptune transiting on your Mars will be activating your Mars in 12th house. But your Mars activating your Neptune will have similar flavors and you'll still be able to pick it up, but it will be just giving you, it will not be as close evocation of your Mars in 12th as Neptune aspecting it. And you can also play with Venus and Neptune to understand Taurus in 12th house. But that's, now I'm just elaborating this to kind of express how many permutations you can have. But it's, yeah, if you're at that level of knowledge or understanding of astrology to incorporate what you find, then by all means. And then when you don't have anything in your house, 12th house, then you want to look at what's not ruling it, but what's on the cusp. So let's say Sagittarius is on the cusp of your 12th house, no planets in the house. So you're looking to who rules, who's the ruler of Sagittarius? Jupiter. So where is your Jupiter? In this case, an example, let's say in the 5th house. So what you want is then you want to look at Neptune, either really Neptune transiting your Jupiter, or Jupiter transiting your Neptune, and also Jupiter and Sun to get to the but more so Jupiter and Neptune, but Jupiter and Sun because it's Jupiter in the 5th house, so that's taking you out of your 12th. But it's kind of this is where the stories can start to build. Like, what is the point of your 12th house? Where is he manifesting? Where does he want to flow into? So in your case, in the 5th house, so that's self-expression, creativity, children, sports, in all other kinds of stuff, fun, romance, all other kinds of 5th house stuff. So that's where you get Jupiter, but it's a Sagittarius 12th house. So you work with the Jupiter Sun to understand where your 12th house wants to go and what's there for it to find. But otherwise, start with the Jupiter Neptune. And in this case, when you don't have a planet in your 12th house, it's actually I think they're equally potent for you to get a sense of your 12th house, whether it's Jupiter transiting your Neptune or Neptune transiting your Jupiter. And this big question that I have, it's been the kind of stumbling block for me getting into my 12th house, because as you may already know, that majority of particularly old style fashioned astrology articles and kind of more popular, more kind of like not the more serious books on astrology, the ones I probably couldn't afford at some point in my life, so I was relying more on articles. But even so, is the 12th house, Neptune, Pisces, is always about spirituality and oneness and, unity with divine and all that beautiful stuff. But I was like, okay, but what do I do with that? And I have Aries in 12th house. What do I do with that, right? And also just wanting something concrete I can actually, bring into my reality. And I have Saturn in 12th house. So here's the kind of an example of my own Saturn, oh sorry, my own 12th house of work with its, players in there, inhabitants that I have in my 12th house. And I have Saturn in Taurus is there. So there's Taurus there. And that's possibly why art. But it's not just. And this is why I think this is not just my story with 12th house, but I would imagine it would be helpful to many of you who are not, who are finding spirituality the way it's being talked about lacking and insubstantial, or just somehow not resonating with it, right? And before I go anywhere else, I just want to say this. I think spirituality in itself is not easy to talk about because it's of the realm that doesn't really use words in a way that we use them, in day to day, and just we assume, this is why we use words to become clearer, to make spirituality clearer by using words is almost like not doing it justice. So that's partly also why. And just generally, 12th house, I think Liz Green is the one of my favorite writers on 12th house. Where she spoke about, I can't remember in what book it is, maybe Neptune. And all these books are in my previous video on astrology book recommendations. And where she talks about that we're nowhere near really having an understanding of the 12th house. And we just about managed and kind of mastered, even though maybe that's also too arrogant a term, the 8th house. And that's thanks to Jung. I'm not even sure. She must be, I'm sure she draws the parallel. But Jung is the whole shadow work is 8th house stuff. Because it kind of, at least in the way I speak of it, and the way I understand Jung, it gives us agency to work with our shadow, and Pluto is all about agency. 12th house, not at all. So the shadows of the 12th house are beautiful. They are and scary, but they're not ours. A lot more often than not, these shadows are not ours. We are asked, particularly if we have planets in there, we will be dealing with them. We're tasked with facing them, but they're not ours. And they're collective, they're ancestral. And like I say, we shouldn't disown them because they're kind of, that they invited themselves, or that we've been given them, but to heal them, but to remember that they're not ours. So we don't take them on too much, and identify with them too much. And that's the piece that's scary. Which is, yeah. So I think actually, God, I think I really went off on a tangent here. I cannot. Anyway, so back to the art piece and why I think the 12th house spirituality or art question applies to any 12th house, not just mine, as I described it, is because it's the dance and between Saturn and Neptune. And irrespective where your Saturn and Neptune is, and whether you have either of them in 12th house, the dynamic between the two is our incarnation, is us living in this world, being born into this world, is the dance between Neptune and Saturn. And this separation from this unity and divine and this oneness, and the suffering that is pervasive in the world, not just today, throughout human history of humanity, is because we keep wanting to get back into the womb, back into this unconditional love with the, one with this consciousness, unconditional God, however you want to call it. And it's Saturn that made us incarnate. Saturn is the incarnation. It's our 3D reality. We have, the spirit Neptune, that divine in us, is in our 3D Saturn bodies. And the conflict is between the two. We don't want to feel separated. We want to go back to that blissful state of existence. But we can't, because that's the point. Once we do, we are back into the world of ether and not in the body. So it doesn't have to be literal death, but as such thing doesn't exist. It does about body though, but we are in the spiridom world, and but you see what I mean? So the conflict is between Neptune and Saturn. Our whole life we are trying to achieve that sense of profound bliss and unconditional self-love or love, to return to love, as they say. And Neptune, oh sorry, and that's Neptune, but the Saturn is what keeps us, what makes us who we are in the bodies and the human body basically that we are. So when you think of our suffering and our pain, and which is in our 12th house of that kind of magnitude, that it's way beyond us. And if we live there and if we have placements there, which is why, like I said at the beginning of this presentation, is particularly useful for any of you with personal planets, and I'm talking particularly personal planets. So up until Uranus, so Saturn included, from Sun onwards. It's overwhelming what we find there. So we need to find a way of releasing it and making sense of it, or just releasing it and making something out of it, not wasting it, because we are there. If you live in 12th house, whatever you have there, you will know when I say there is a sense of sacredness of this grief and of this hypersensitivity to suffering, on a transpersonal level. This is way beyond personal. And particularly if you have a 12th house Venus, this is just a side note, you will find that your personal relationships are never personal. You kind of, the closer you get to me with the Venus in 12th, the more distance that you'll feel between us, but not in a horrible way, but in a way of, I don't want to sidetrack, in a way that's beautiful and comforting, actually, and soothing. So we're talking, stuff of gods, but of good gods, that are handing us down these, and they're trusting us. And if we have 12th house placements, those are the tools that we can help the collective to heal through our own little life. So back to the art. So yes, spirituality is one way, but to me, it's art is a far more meaningful and inspiring and benevolent way, and actually helpful way to contribute to this healing of the collective, because the language of 12th house is not the language of words as I speak them now, is the language of something else, something that is beyond words. So art, visual, or any kind of artful expression where you put yourself the service, kind of like be a channel for these emotions or these things that you're experiencing in the 12th house, and do something with it, put it into a form. And even if it's like a voice singing, so that's a form that can be heard, can be experienced in our 3D world, even though it's ephemeral, it disappears. And actually, more ephemeral it is, the better, the more of 12th house it is. Dance, body dance, and all of these. So to dedicate your activities in your 12th house archetypes, planets that you have there, turn them into works of art. If spirituality doesn't speak to you the way like it didn't speak to me, because I mean, practicing rituals and, full moon, new moon, any other kind of daily, monthly, yearly rituals you have are essentially doing Virgo stuff. So that's kind of grounding your spirituality. But art is actually, making art is the experience of spirit. Rituals are not in themselves, in my world, in my view. They're just being, making me feel grounded. But when I'm actually in the flow of making art, or pouring myself out into this vessel, into this container, whatever that is for me. For me, it's mostly paper. I feel like I'm communing with like something higher, something. I feel spiritual, I suppose, is the word. And I am not looking spiritual when I'm doing it, but I feel like one. Like I'm, feel the spirit, or feel inspired. I'm in spirit. So basically, spirituality or art for me, it's art always, because that is at least my choice of spirituality. And I'm going to show you some examples of artists that speak the language of 12th house. So they are Gertrude Abercrombie, Leonora Carrington, Remedios Varo, Dora Ma, Dorothea Tanning, Leonore Feeney, Kay Sage, and Bridget Ticknor. So these are some older, some younger, all surrealists, because the 12th house is very, of the other world. It's not of this 3D world. So as you can see, the images are all quite surreal and dreamlike. See, like, the darkness is very friendly. At least, I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I always feel like 12th house is a very friendly place. It can be scary, but it's not really it's not really dangerous, other than what I just spoke about earlier, when you're not grounded. See, this is one of the amazing, this is to me one of the definitions of 12th house. So this door is just, there is all this room around it. You can walk around it. It's not really a barrier. But so this would be for someone from outside of 12th house, seeing you while you're struggling with something, where you can see how you can just go around it. But for you in the 12th house, you are stuck on this door and you don't see. But I think it's beyond that. I think it's more than that. It's like you see the rest. You actually see everything in 12th house. But there is a point and there is a reason why you are sticking to the door, as if you can't go around it. The point isn't to go around. The point is to be standing at the door as this person is standing, as if they can't walk around and, look at it properly, as opposed to just peeking. I mean, I'm not going to go into the metaphor and symbolism of the painting. Maybe that's not the point, but it's a metaphor for 12th house, and I'm using it for that. So in the 12th house, when you're in there, all these rules are just there for a reason, even though they seem unreasonable. There is also a great sense of solitude as a really nourishing, beautiful solitude in 12th house. Okay, and now I'm gonna take you through some slides that are just like visual images of what I feel they're very evocative of 12th house, and I'm gonna give you my take on them as to why. So the 12th house is the house where the only language that works is the language of archetypes, which is one of those is fairy tales, myths, and mythology. Because it speaks to the unconscious, this world that is, like I say, beyond our rational mind, and we make sense of things without being able to explain how and why and what sense we just made. It's also like being suspended somewhere in between space, time, or outside it, or in between. It's more like an in-between place, I feel. And if you think about it, it's the house after the 11th, which is the last it's the emancipated human. It's like really 11th house, Aquarius, Uranus archetypes are the peak of humanity, the development of the consciousness to the highest level. And once we achieve that, we're back in the 12th house to not come back, or to come back through the first house, Aries, Mars archetype, back into the 3D form again. So it's in between, between death and rebirth kind of place. And it's surreal is another kind of element of it, as you've seen from the artworks as well. Um, Again, where the rules don't apply, so we can have a lovely home inside a suitcase and sky, as a laptop. It's not a laptop, it's a suitcase, isn't it? Lid, but top, I mean. This is another great example of, particularly if you have a Uranus in 12th house, this would maybe resonate. So, or if there is a transit of Uranus through your, or if you have Aquarius in your 12th house, so you'd have flashes of insight, yeah, I think. But also it's a dreamlike state. It's where we dream. It's the house of dreams, house of sleep. So you see this person is in sleeping gown, and they're walking. Before the lightning struck, they were in the pitch black. And as you know, when lightning strikes, it's like makes everything like illuminates the center or wherever it just on its path, but makes everything either side of it darker than it was before. So it's blinding in that way, really, as I think the saying goes. As you can see, it's darker, these corners are darker. And so what seemed maybe before the lightning, just a pitch black kind of maybe scary place, now it's illuminated that there is a safe house that this person can go to, for instance. So this is water, which is what 12th house is. It's the water house. And again, things are out of proportion. Things are just not, the rules don't apply. So this moon is like, yeah, as you can see, humongous. And but there's also this beauty in loneliness, or rather aloneness, this little house in this idyllic and potentially a bit spooky, or just a bit eerie, or just maybe you wouldn't want to go there. I mean, I would. I'm sure many of the 12th house people would. But yeah, maybe for some it would be just a bit too isolated. This is when I was speaking about how to enter 12th house. Is like this is the doorway to it. It's wonky. It's not. It is like almost like that. If you are familiar with what's his name? Sorry, just checking. It actually was recording. Harry Potter, and how it's like a terminal, something like you only like an entrance to a port, like a portal, that it's there and then it's not there, kind of thing. So entering into 12th house is a bit like that, a bit off center, a bit skewed, and you don't know what's on the other side, and it could be back to the square one in this instance, meaning you just don't know. But you certainly will be disorientated just by walking through this door into a room, even if, particularly if the room is like normal, as it were. But even if it kind of follows this line of wonkiness, there'll still be disorientation because you're coming from a not so wonky place. This is another good visual for 12th house, and this is kind of how you try to live in your 12th house. So you don't want to be, you want to allow all the water and the floodings and to be coming in and out as it wishes. So, and the bottom of the house is in the water. So that's, although from the house and architectural perspective may not be right, but from 12th house perspective it is. But you have a drier place where you can go. So this is your Virgo house, or if you have Virgo in there, you utilize that earthiness. So you always bring earth and grounding in your emotional, because water, sorry, by the way, if I haven't clarified, I'm sure it's known to everyone watching this. The water stands for emotions, and the bigger the water, the bigger the emotions, and the more of them and more overwhelming they can be to the point of drowning us. So having this upper level that's a bit, kind of gives you that distance a bit, and where you can dry yourself is important. This is, I had to include this because I'm sure there will be some people with Saturn in 12th, or Jupiter, or Capricorn in 12th. This is just, and in my case particularly, if you have a 10th house ruler, this is actually, even if it's not Capricorn or Saturn, if you have 10th house ruler in 12th, then this might also be something you can relate to, which is no matter what you build, it just dissolves. It's just, it's like building on sand, on quicksand, or just sand, dry sand, and then it just crumbles and doesn't last long. But that's the point. That's one of the ultimate truths, that nothing does last long. And if he wants to live while it's healthy and he doesn't want to, grow, outgrow and get overgrowth, and just get into the age where, yeah, it's lived past its sell by date kind of thing, and then he ends up being ill. If it's a person or an institution, or this is again the sort of the different proportions there, but also the cuteness and the kind of connections to nature the 12th house is, and just the cuteness and sweetness. There is real sweetness in 12th house. This is again the sort of sense that we may feel. I mean, the 12th house stands for prisons and hospitals, and but essentially it's like self-imposed. I mean, okay, in reality these people are sent to prison or to mental hospital because the society deems them dangerous or incapable of being functioning right in the society without outside of these institutions. I'm not going into that, but I do want to say that, metaphorically speaking, our mental state is a portal to our reality, basically. So in this case, this young woman, looking very dashing, somewhat sad in her expression, looks like a prisoner, looks sad, but she can walk out. It's like a self-imposed prison. It's like Eight of Swords in um, tarot. And so yeah, so there is that sense that you can get out. It's a house. It's a nebulous house. It's made of cotton wool and the clouds. They can be scary. It's and energies that are all kinds of, and scary and not so scary, but none of it has a physical threat to you, unless you let it. It's like, and you let it with your mind or not. So that's my point. You are really in control. There is nothing there to scare you to not want to go in. You just need to get in, equipped with this knowledge that it's in your mind, that you need to be grounded, etc. So this is the sense of abandonment as well is a very big theme in 12th house. Abandonment from divine love, from unconditional love. But that's the point. In 12th house, if you do things 12th housey, meaning, sorry, I meant to say, if you feel like that in your life, then go to your 12th house and see what you have there, and then use those archetypes and what they stand for to develop your connection and with this unconditional divine love. And yeah, but we do feel, if we don't know this, so we don't do it actively and intentionally, we may well feel abandoned. And this is another great visual, because it's that stuff that's hidden, that's like a blind spot, or just the depth. There is so much more than you can see with the eye and with the mind, as it does in the 3D world. Apparitions, and this is the scary bit. And I mean, a metaphor again of this is, how many times have you thought you saw something, and then you look closely and you can see it's not what you thought it was, but it looks scary, and then you come around the corner and it's actually, you can see it's, like those plays on shadow, like, like it looks like a scary something, and really it's just a leaf, being the way it's been posed. So just changing the perspective, and you can see that it's not as scary, but it's because it's it's so unlike the world we know. Everything is off, everything is just not what it seems. So it's full of those apparitions that are either fun or maybe less fun. And there's this piece again, that, so this is like a happy family, but because 12th house is like I said earlier, I think you see everything. With your Neptune in Pisces, or 12th house, right? So like the totality. And in this image, let's say this is a genuine happy family between I think this is a Hansel and Gretel actually story. We just now clocked. Okay, so we know that that doesn't end well. He ends well, doesn't he? But it's not exactly happy. But let's imagine. I was going with this with the different story, and I'm gonna go there. Just yeah. So let's say this is a real family, and they're genuinely happy. But if you can see, it's kind of there's an eerie sense, so there is a bit foreboding and a bit sinister, maybe vibe even. That's because let's imagine they're actually for real, genuinely happy. That's because you're seeing everything else that's part of this tapestry of this reality. So this mother that's maybe really genuinely loving and happy has her own shadow and darkness that doesn't impede on children and her love there. So there's no danger for the children, but you see her darkness if you're in 12th house and you see everything kind of thing. Um, you also see all the, all the spirits, all the other energies that are around that are not maybe so benevolent and but are not necessarily going to damage anyone. So there's no real danger, but you're seeing all that it's there, and it's the totality is full of good and bad. It doesn't determine that it will be bad, the story outcome or anything, but you can see it. So therefore, that's the unease of 12th house. Again, this kind of archetypal fairy tale vibe. And yeah, this is a great example. I mean, this is a real house. I don't know how they live there in terms of walking. It's probably normal floors when you're there. See, but I couldn't actually live in a house that's literally wonky that I'll have to walk. I'll be seasick. Anyway, but from the outside, this is it. It's all skewed. It's all just, what's that? Like a fisheye. I think it's fisheye filter that kind of looks a little bit like that. And fish is Pisces. And so there you go. It's kind of another nice coincidence. No, it's not synchronicity or correspondence. Correspondence is the word I want to use. So yeah, so that's definitely 12th house vibe. And there we go here. Again, that sort of, different elevated point from afar. And again, I mean, this could be, I don't know what this evokes to you, but it could be medieval, and medieval times were not exactly the nicest, I suppose, from today's perspective. But it's also solid, foundation, and it's a solid building. So the safety is what I mean. I always want to remind people that there is safety to be found in 12th house. And this, I think it's my last slide. And yeah, so this is again that, enormous water, and yet this tiny little house on, well, I don't know if it's an actual house, but it's something. But yeah, so there is that sense of just overwhelming vastness in 12th house. But look at the beauty. Yeah, this is the end. Okay, so hopefully this was helpful and enjoyable, and I shall see you next week.